Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to see you. I actually am really excited about today's show and the guest because it's a bit of a departure. Typically, we have talent acquisition leaders as guests. This time, our guest is not just a talent acquisition practitioner, but he helps the companies sort out how they actually engage with candidates and source them and teach them how to hunt or fish for people. So I think his perspective will be incredibly valuable. So Jeremy Roberts, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I kind of, as you know, I jumped on you pretty quickly and said, you know what, Jeremy, you'd be a great guest for the show. So you know the format of the show and the intention is to add value. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and just tell the audience who you are and give them some context and background about who Jeremy Roberts is?
Okay. No, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. My name's Jeremy Roberts. I started in this crazy space that we work in. I think it was 2002. I was a recruiter at a search firm in Dallas doing healthcare retained search, and I have been doing it ever since. So I was a financial advisor and was ready to make a change. It had been a rough couple of years. And I had a client who was a recruiter, and he was making more money than me, had a similar skill set, I thought. And I asked him about it, and he hired me. And so that's how I got into the business. But I did retained executive search until about 2009. And then I transitioned to corporate recruiting, and I started a couple of sourcing functions and managed the biggest team I ever managed. It was 25 sourcers. So I was kind of in that middle management rank in talent acquisition. And then I went to work at Sourcecon. So when I was at Sourcecon, that was my first kind of analyst type role. You know, I was analyzing the tech people were using and organizing a conference and blogging. And then I did about 3.5 years at Sourcecon and then went on into the tech space. So since then, I've been working with tech vendors. Right now, I'm with Seekout. So,
and what is Sourcecon, Jeremy? I mean, to give just so people can, because I think it's not insignificant.
No, so Sourcecon was really where if you think back to 2002 when I started, I didn't even have a computer at my desk. I had a notepad and a hospital blue book, and I would just call around and write notes down. At the end of the day, I would have a list of emails I needed to send, and I would go to a shared computer and send emails, right? So then fast forward to like 2008-ish, the internet was really becoming important for what we do. And a lot of us were trying to get really good at kind of harnessing the information that was on the web. And Sourcecon was really the first sourcing conference, right? Where people were talking about how to find people for recruiting purposes online. And it was pretty small at the beginning, and then it grew. And it's still a very popular conference, but so much has been automated that the story has changed. You know, it used to be really tactical at Sourcecon, and now it's a lot more about tool selection and how to engage the candidates you find. But back then, I mean, it was, you almost needed to know a little bit of code to get what you needed.
I tend to, for folks that aren't in recruiting, I tend to refer to sourcers as the hacking community of HR.
They're kind of, they remind me of like, you know, in the cop shows, like they've
Mhm.
got the computer expert and then they're
Yes.
sitting there finding everything. And then the
Yes.
detectives are watching over their shoulder. And after they find something interesting, the detectives all run out of the room.
That's right.
The
That's the
Sourcecon
bit.
crowd is like they're the tech guy
That
or the tech
I
girl.
was
in the building.
actually before ERE bought Sourcecon. I was at the first Sourcecon, first two Sourcecon with Leslie and Rob and all of those folks. And again, it was like going to a hack. It was like going to, because it was so technical back then. You know, it was out of my depth because I didn't know much about that. But it was just the people were also very fun to be around. So it was a fun crowd. But also you know, back to Andrew's point about SourceCon, it's not just a conference. I think one of the things that you did a really wonderful job at your tenure at SourceCon is you building community, building global
Thank you.
awareness of not just, you know, the sourcing function, but how it relates to hiring managers and recruiters, and you know, and just kind of building a group of people that, again, what I love about SourceCon is people just share.
Yeah.
Like, they're freely, if they've hacked something or figured something out, they're more than willing, at least the folks that I think that I know and you know, they're more than willing to just like tell people about it. Like, hey, I just found this way to, you know, find this, which I love, because that's not the way in a lot of industries. When people
No.
find out secret recipes to do something, they usually kind of keep them to themselves.
Well, what they would, the whole point of it was like you would learn new things and then you would go sit around a table with
Yeah.
some other people who were doing the same thing. And then you go home and you're like the only person who can do all these things. You know what I'm saying? So they were strengthening their own position, you know, like they would become, one person would become an expert in crawling, you know, and then you know, another person would become an expert in Boolean, and another person would become an expert in, you know, finding email addresses, and then they would all come together and then take that back to their organization. So they become kind of that person that has to be dependent on, you know? And so, yeah, it's grown a lot.
So Jeremy,
go ahead.
William, but I think it'd be really interesting for you to spend a couple of minutes and just explain to the audience what a sourcer is or what a sourcer does, and compare and contrast what a sourcer does in relationship to what a recruiter does. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I think I'm never not amazed when people don't understand the process of recruiting from end to end. And Sourcecon, it just to put a bow on it, audience, it's basically the dream force of sourcing. So if you want to learn how to source candidates, you know, Jeremy was the editor for Sourcecon and responsible for pulling all together all these people and talking about best practices, creative, resourceful ways to be more strategic, more effective at sourcing. But Jeremy, so talk to us about sourcing and compare and contrast that with recruiting.
Yeah, it's interesting because the definition, no matter who you talk to, if you say, let's have a conversation about sourcing and recruiting, you're going to end up arguing all day because everyone's definition is different. So the first thing you have to do is say, okay, how are we defining it for this debate or this conversation? Right. So the way that we broke it down when I was the editor to try to have intelligent conversations around this was more along the lines of, this is the entire recruiting process. You know, the front end of that is candidate identification, right? And all the different ways that you can identify candidates, right? In 2008 and 2009, if somebody was a sourcer, they only did that because it was really hard to build lists. In about 2012, 2013, the people aggregator movement comes around, and anybody who can write 3 keywords can now create a list of 500 in a few minutes, right? So then the definition of sourcing evolved because people didn't want a list because 500 names is nothing. So they then wanted qualified, interested, available candidates, as Glenn Caffey started to call them. So sourcing became about candidate identification and engagement, right? And so in most organizations today where people are sourcers, they're not presenting candidates to recruiters unless they know they're qualified, interested, and available to talk.
Okay,
right. And So yeah, so sourcing went from identification to identification and engagement, and then in most organizations, kind of where the line of delineation is the recruiter is kind of like an account manager for the hiring manager relationship, right?
Those
So
three core, what'd you say? Qualified?
interested and available.
Okay.
Yeah. So if a candidate is qualified, interested, available today, most sourcers move them forward. But, like I said, in 2008, they were just building lists, and whoever built the biggest list won. Right. And then I remember when I was a sourcing manager in like 2014, 2015, people would give me lists. It's like, I don't need a list. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can build lists all day, right? We had an outsourced firm, and the VPs were like, Jeremy, you need to use these candidates. I was like, well, they give me so many, I don't even know what to do with them. It's just names, right? So now the sourcing team, they're savvy marketers. They can identify, they know how to write good emails. They know how to, Matt Ferry, who I believe with Amazon now, but he used to send a code snippet that a candidate would paste into whatever program they used to read code, and it would tell them something funny. Do you know what I'm saying? And so they would all reply laughing, so they're creative. What's that?
Sourcing, is it fair to say that good sourcing is an art form? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And good sourcers don't see limitations. They look at every piece of information as a starting point, not an end point.
So if I'm a candidate, or if I'm looking, one of the biggest frustrations, challenges that I hear is, hey, I'm sending my resume everywhere. How do I become a cherry on that list of qualified, engaged, candidates? What's a prototype? And I understand there's it depends on the vocation or the company or the policies and the procedures, but just blocking and tackling, basic fundamentals. How can I position myself as a really attractive candidate to a sourcer?
To a sourcer is you just give every detail about yourself, right? Like that, there's this really weird notion, and I think it comes from when we used to go to Kinko's before an interview and print a resume, that it should be one page, right? Sourcers are out there, they're looking for someone who has, the hiring manager listed off a ridiculous list of criteria, and they may be unrelated technologies, right? You may not even know that it will benefit you, but you may have touched a piece of software in your internship, and then 15 years later, that keyword associated with 3 other things on your profile that you found unimportant could be the reason you are discovered. So the first thing I would say is, if you're submitting your resume online, or you're building out a LinkedIn profile, or unless you don't want to be found, you need to be very, very clear about what you've done, right?
Yeah.
And
over descriptive almost to a point.
Yeah, be over descriptive, and think about like what a hiring manager will say. Okay, we want someone who can come in, who has scaled a startup SaaS, who has been with a growing startup SaaS company and implemented a customer success platform like this, right? Like, that's the language. And this recruiter who has no idea what any of it means is writing that into a search engine, and so that's, I think, the problem for a lot of people as far as being found is, I get recruiters all the time. They call me, they're like, I can't find anybody who does this. And I was like, well, because who would write that? You need to know that skill is implied by having done this.
Yeah.
So you should be searching for this, but recruiters don't often know that. So you have to be overly, it's like you're telling your parents what you do for a living.
Yeah.
You've got to,
good luck with that. You have to use
you've got to be
cards.
very descriptive. Yeah.
So I want to ask a kind of a personal question as it relates to your leadership style and things that you've learned along the way. Because you've had a really, really interesting career, so far. You got a lot of career left in you. Describe the kind of the people that flourish around you. Like, what are the characteristics that are of those people that kind of make Jeremy better?
Oh, they're very organized. So that's the first one. No, I mean, and it's funny. Like, I think one of the most important things in a leader are being self-aware. And I, I'm a really good individual contributor, by the way. A really, really good individual contributor. I can be a leader, and I've been a good leader in some environments. But I think one of the things that I'm pretty good at is self-awareness and kind of knowing what my deficiencies are and hiring for that. You know, like
Absolutely.
the example I would give is I'm very kind of big picture and kind of, let's talk about, like in a talent acquisition setting, let's talk about your entire tech stack and how they work together. And I can moderate 10 people talking about it and brainstorming and everything. But where I struggled was after the conversation, getting it into a Visio chart that everybody loved. You know, it was just like, I don't know if it was the attention span of doing that or just the way my brain processes information. But so I hired a person who would always go with me to meetings like that. And then this person couldn't really even understand what all had happened until she had put it in a Visio chart. Do you know what I'm saying? And then she would come to me the next day and she'd be like, this is what we landed on. This is where we started. This is where we landed, right? And it was amazing, right? And that was her natural cadence, was to create documents like that. But the beauty was what it took for her to understand everything and process it and internalize it was a deliverable for the client.
Yep.
You know, so I was able to use my strengths, which was moderating a discussion and kind of helping them solve their own problems, while someone else whose strength is documenting all of that was documenting it, right? So for me, that was my leadership style, right? And then fast forward, right? You're doing this type of work with a team that you built around kind of those, you know, filling in the gaps and everything, right? Fast forward, things in the organization change, and people will come to you and be like, this person is no good at that. And it's like, well, no kidding. I didn't hire them for that, right? You think because you pay them this much, they must be good at that, but that doesn't mean that that's a strength, right? And so I guess I look for what people are naturally good at and try to free up as much of their time for them to do that while they, you know, we all have to work on our deficiencies, but you should be able to wake up and spend a majority of your day doing what you're really good at.
Wow.
So
that might be somebody tag that, timestamp that might be a nice little.
that the guy with no direct reports who's
but so Jeremy,
Doesn't matter.
who's loving what he does right now, right? It's very easy for me to pontificate on leadership today.
No, but it's interesting stuff. It's a good question, William. So I want to back up. So Jeremy, you work with a lot of different companies and brand name companies on helping them become better at sourcing. And you're going to forget more about sourcing in the next 30 seconds than most people will ever know.
Well, probably not.
When I talk to people, and I'm sure you guys can relate, it's like being good at getting a job isn't something you want to excel at. It's like being good at dating. And that's what I try to tell people. Like, it's not, don't take it personally. So there's that. But what are some ways that you, in your vast body of work, what are things that companies are doing well in the sourcing space, and what aren't they doing well? And can you kind of compare and contrast best practices in sourcing in your experience and how that looks like? Again, with the caveat that one of the beauties of the show and the format of the show is we are trying to give, because I think there's a perception again that, oh gosh, no one's getting back to me. No one likes me. No one's calling me. I don't know how to engage with companies. And we all four know the companies are spending good money after bad, trying to become better at sourcing so they can hire the right people. And it's like this. So what are some things that you think companies do well and don't do well? And broad strokes is fine, high level.
Yeah. So I'm touching on something that I know William is pretty passionate about here, right? The HR tech stack is broken, right? You've got kind of my description of the HR tech stack. If you think of it like a tall building, you've got the bottom floor is the ATS. The second floor in a mature organization is oftentimes a CRM. The ATS was built to
Applicant tracking system.
Applicant tracking system. It was built to store candidates. And then it became so compliance ridden that even the good ones have a hard time innovating because there's so much to do with compliance, right? I saw today a big press release was a company released some COVID tracking. It's like, how boring is COVID tracking for an ATS, right? Like, that's innovation. That's not innovative, right? But anyway, so the ATS is for compliance and storing applicants. The CRM came about because it was not compliant.
Stands for,
well, customer relationship management. For most organizations in recruiting, I guess it's candidate relationship management. So it's kind of the marketing vehicle for people who basically, once they're in the ATS, if they meet the definition of an internet applicant, you have to do so much compliance work, you can't even be productive. So companies needed a CRM to market to candidates who had not yet applied, right? And so that's where the CRM came about. So that's
it's like HubSpot for recruiters.
HubSpot for recruiters.
I'm trying to, because listen, people don't know this. They don't know that compliance is a huge issue, that when they apply, there's a certain measure of
second oldest HR tech category, that it's a 50-year-old category.
You're a lot less likely to get renewed if you just don't look at the candidate.
That's right.
I mean, to get renewed, to get sued. The lawsuits won't happen if you don't click the resume. If you click the resume, it's highly possible you could be sued, unfortunately. So we have to help them understand all of that and process that data, right? So I'm talking about my building here, right? So you've got the ATS, and you've got the CRM as the second floor. And then at most organizations, LinkedIn is the necessary third floor. And then people are logging in there and they're sending in-mails all day long.
And people are sourcers
and recruiters. They're just sending in-mails all day long to people who already exist in the ATS and the CRM. And they just keep sending them more in-mails and spending money on in-mails and asking them to apply again to another job, right? And then you've got, so that's 3 floors. Then you've got, Monster, Career Builder, Indeed, Zip Recruiter, Dice, and then up at the top of that, these are databases. Like LinkedIn is a necessary evil, and then you've got the job boards. That's low-hanging fruit because they got frustrated over the weekend with their manager and didn't want to go to work on Monday, so they uploaded their resume. So then you got like 10 floors. So you got to imagine your recruiters are logging in and out of all these tools all day. And they find somebody in Monster, and then they go, look, have we in-mailed them? Are they in our CRM for a campaign already? Wait, are they eligible for hire based on status as an ATS? So it's like 10 floors disconnected. Then you throw Seek Out up there, and then, you've got all these extensions. I need to know how to crawl and find contact information for all these people. So if you think about it, there are hundreds of millions of people in every one of these tools now. Everybody has access to the same data at this point. It's ridiculous. And we're dealing with this broken tech stack, right? So basically everybody's wasting their time spending money on data instead of leveraging what they already own in the ATS and the CRM, which I'm fine. Some people truly have a top of funnel problem.
Right.
Other people, they think when it's broken, they have a top of funnel problem. It's not always top of funnel, right? So I think that's
just to put a bow on it. So it sounds pretty soupy, and we all know it's soupy and messy and decentralized and fractured. So all that being said, what do you think companies, what are some of the companies that you work with that you think, I'm not like to fishing for compliments, but what are some companies doing to combat that or to work around that or to be more strategic? Because a tall building that's with no elevator sounds very A lot of stairs.
with a correct foundation.
Yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
you need to be able to, and I obviously I work at a company that's pretty good at this. That's why I work here, and that's what we're working on.
I would
right?
agree.
But the next step is to have one place where you could see what's going on in all of those, right? And so you're not like, when you get a new search, you can look in your ATS quickly and know, like quickly by like in under a minute, you can know, this is how many people exist in our ATS with these skills. This is how many people exist in the open market. I own 60% of the total addressable market for this job. I don't need to advertise. So how much money can you save being able to make decisions like that, right? And then you can execute and re-engage all of those people while you're advertising for something that is, you've got a new plant in a new location you've never worked on before. And so you don't have resumes for that one. And you can see that through all this visibility, right? So being able to see what's inside all of those floors without bouncing around all day long. And it's like, I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, for me, my garage is unorganized. So when I organize it in the summer, I realize I've got 10 hammers. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need 10 hammers, but instead of organizing the garage, I just go buy another $8 hammer.
It's too easy. There's a Home Depot only 3 miles away. It's
exactly.
too easy.
Great metaphor.
So Jeremy, I want to move over to the advice side of things. I'm going to give you 2 questions and I want you to pick one. So through your career, you've accumulated all this knowledge. And so you are at a place where you can give some people great advice, and you do. I know you do. So best advice for hiring managers. That's one question. What would be that? What would you answer there? Or job search advice that you've given or you will give to your kids?
Mm-hmm.
Which you pick one. So it's either
I
advice for hiring managers.
I want to do the job search advice that I would give my kids, right?
Come on down.
So yeah, I grew up, my dad was he was a life insurance agent. So I grew up like every time I'm in the car listening to Lee Iacocca and Zig Ziglar. And do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Car university with cassette tapes, of motivational speakers, right? So one time when I was in college, it's like, I didn't realize what I was good at, but parents are good at knowing what you're good at before you do, right? And so he gave me this book, and it was signed from this motivational speaker. It was called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And it was pretty much, you guys shake your head because you know what that means, right? Yeah. It's before you need it, you need to be making deposits, because we moved every couple of years my entire life. And my dad was like, everywhere we've moved from, and this was before the internet, so it took effort, I maintained relationships with tons of people, right? So to this day, all around the country, wherever I lived, all around the world, we lived in England when I was in high school, right? So I've got very high level friends that I met when I was 14 or 16. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just it was natural for me to maintain those relationships, right? So that's the first thing I would say, is constantly be thinking, don't, just because you've got a stable job and you're an introverted developer and you don't need anyone right now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be out there doing those things, right? So that was natural for me because of my personality type and kind of how I'm wired as a human, but I see it in other people. I try to help them do that if they're not naturally that way. And I think that's incredibly important. The other job search advice, I got laid off in August, total surprise. And we're in the middle of a pandemic and I panicked. Right. And so what helped me was I had been a recruiter. So I made 150 dials a day as a recruiter, and I had to be connected, having conversations for 4 hours a day, or I had, the stats on my desk when I got there the next morning. They tracked my phone time. So I knew what it felt like to be fully engaged. And I fully engaged my job search as though I were a straight commission recruiter again. And I woke up, my wife and kids left the house every morning at about 6:30 for school. And I was I was on the phones, and I was old school headhunter in reverse. And I think people don't understand what it really means to be actively looking for a job. Do you know what I'm saying? Like laying around fantasizing is not looking for a job. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I don't know, like that hustle. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like you try to teach that to people. My daughter is engaged, and so my wife and I are like planning a wedding, and we gave her like 4 or 5 things to do. And after about 3 weeks of her saying, we're going to do that, I'm like, well, you do realize like you actually have to do it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like thinking about how you're going to do it and thinking about who would be great to talk to is not the same as doing it, right? So that's the other thing. And the other, if I had to summarize the other thing that I think is important, right? The first one was always be making deposits in relationships that can eventually help you. The second one is be intentional and actually do it, like make dials all day. The third is learn how to tell your story. And I had a recruiter one time, like this was back, it's not as big of a deal anymore, but I graduated high school in 98, and college in 98. I'm older than that. I graduated high school in 94, college in 98.
I wasn't going to say anything.
And still in the, people are like, he's got an engaged daughter and he was in high school. But no, the job hopping thing was really big deal back then, because all of our parents had one job most of their careers, and so I felt like a job hopper, and I was a little insecure about my story. And then one day I was with a recruiter, and he was like, oh, I'm really excited. You're going to get this job. And I'd be like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Because I'd had a lot of job changes, right? And he goes, well, let me tell you how I tell your story. I was like, okay. He goes, you had the same manager at these 3 companies. Your manager hired you here, and then 8 months later, he got a new job. So he paid you more to be a trainer, to be a technical trainer for recruiters at this job. And then he went here, and he was the head of global training, and he hired you there. And then so just, you don't have to have like every job, it doesn't have to be progressive, but you have to be able to tell people what the connection between your path is. And understand how every step you took led you to this weird, like I never could have prepared for my job today. Like there's not a path to that. It's like your weird choices along the way kind of developed you into what you are. So you have to be really good at telling that story. And sometimes we're not good at figuring it out ourselves. So you have to talk to your friends, your past managers, your spouse, right? And they can help you learn how to tell that story without, it looking, like you just got fired a bunch,
What a great, and this is why I love the show and having guests like you on it, because the key takeaways I got, and then the business about learning how to advocate for yourself. I mean, they don't teach that. So if you may be the best darn plumber in the world, but if you're not confident, so you're a competent plumber, but if you're not you're a competent plumber, but if you're not a confident plumber and you can't advocate for yourself or tell your story, to your point, it just doesn't matter. And so that's one of my frustrations, but something I'm constantly, because it's hard not to take it personally when you feel like you're not in that candidate stack. The other key takeaway that you've done a really good job of highlighting is how hard companies work and even not smart, but hard at trying to hire the right person, and they don't have it figured out. So the more that you can help them by helping yourself to get in position is is incredibly helpful. And then the last piece is, everywhere you go, I think that, I forget, I think it was Larry, you guys on the couple shows ago said, always be closing wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, make sure you introduce yourself to people. What are you doing? How are you doing? Just always be building your network, always be digging your well. And if you're shy, okay, we're getting producer Bev just waving the flag here. So, that's actually a good point. Producer Bev, you have been awfully quiet. Do you have any questions for Jeremy? I'd love for you to weigh in.
Just two things I wanted to ask. This whole time you were talking, I thought that blanket on the chair behind you was a blanket,
Yes.
but then it moved.
Jasmine,
It's a dog.
Get up, Jasmine. Come here.
It's a cute dog.
This is Jasmine. She has her come up. Nope, there she goes. So Jasmine is a standard poodle, and you see
I had a black standard.
Okay.
Oh,
so
there's another one.
Right under Jasmine is a miniature. And then we've got another one in there that I can see, but she's not in here with us. But
my favorite show so far.
This one is the daughter of Sourcecon Grandmaster Cindy Davis's poodle.
Oh wow!
Cool.
So yeah, she's even got a sourcing connection.
She's good people.
She's got COVID hair right now.
That's okay. So
not Cindy.
No.
Poodle has COVID hair.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much.
yes,
That made my day. My other thing is, when I was without a job and I was hitting all these new ways of applying all online, I found it, I must have been using certain words that are killer words, because I was at a point of experience and everything where I thought, oh, my phone's not going to stop ringing, and it was crickets. Are there any particular words that you know of that are kill words or never use or never say? So people don't inadvertently write some.
What shouldn't you do?
Yeah.
And it's probably different for every career profession. I don't know, like the people who I admire, like I have no idea how old Jerry Crispin is right now, but if you just talk to Jerry Crispin on the phone, you would think he was 35. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, curiosity, open-mindedness. Like I think a lot of people, and I'm over 40, so I'm, but I think a lot of people, they get panicky, they get, and they feel desperate, and they feel, I think people are scared of people who are tired and exhausted. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and
am I catching this person on the downslope?
Yeah. And I think it's, like I said about Jerry, if you talk to Jerry, you feel like he's 35. You talk to, John Sumser, same thing, right? They've got so much energy for what they do. And they probably don't even have to be doing it anymore. So that's kind of, I don't know, like you don't want to be part of age discrimination, but I think a lot of us do it to ourselves just because we are so beat down by the time we get in the room. Like you look old in your eyes if you're not careful, right?
Tired.
Yeah, like you're just feeling so helpless, right? So
I
don't
think
know.
that's the reverse of passion. It's like when people can't detect your passion. And that's one of the things that when I'd interview for passion. I don't give a shit if you're passionate about coin collecting. Like it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
As long as it's not something illegal. But just passion. When you can't find that passion, go to the next candidate.
Well, even if it is a mindless job you're overqualified for, you need to show that you have a passion about something that this job will facilitate for you.
That's right.
Like, yeah, this is a substitute teacher job, but let me tell you why this is perfect for me. Because this is what I do from 3 to 10 every day. And I just need a little extra. And if they see you're driven by something and you have energy, right, then it's, I don't know. That's the other thing is just that.
So Bev's question was, are there kill words or kill? So your best advice to someone what not to do, whether they're, posting and praying or doing everything online or whatever they're doing. Yeah. What are some worst practices?
I think I unconsciously just admitted that I think the entire hiring process is broken because my answer implies that you're speaking to someone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So
That's exactly right.
the main thing you don't do is expect anything from someone you've never spoken to.
100%.
Ooh, wait, say that again.
The main thing you don't do is expect someone you've never spoken to respond.
Yeah.
They
don't owe you anything.
That is the, you have just, and you didn't stumble over it. You freaking ripped it out of the park. That is so much of the career advice or coaching is, okay, when you get the interview, it's, hey, just, I want to get the call. How do I get the call? To your point, what people don't really understand is many of these decisions are being made electronically by AI or machine learning, or, some sort of automated system that already exists, that, to your earlier comment, is probably not a well-oiled machine. So you are leaving the bulk of the opportunity in someone else's hands.
Yeah. Can I throw something out there? Like, I know a lot of my advice probably comes from my privilege. You could put to be continued and have a diversity expert. Like the way that I behave and keep myself employed is calling people who take my call. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, and,
of course.
And so
But some of that you've worked for.
I've worked for a lot of it. Yeah. I've worked for a lot of it. Right. So I don't want to discredit that, but I think if this were to lead into a diversity inclusion, that'd be fascinating to talk through, right? Like, okay, Jeremy, that's great advice because people are taking your call, right? What about this person without connection? What about the first person who ever?
What if you were English was your second language?
Exactly.
Now
exactly.
How do you get that to happen? Andrew, do you have a question? Because I have one last quick question.
And then I'll wrap it up.
Okay. So, worst interview experience, either as a candidate or a recruiter.
Nice. And be salacious and
make it count.
I knew this was going to happen. I have some that I can't even talk about because everyone would laugh and then we would all look insensitive.
No.
Do you know what I'm saying?
The
like
part's good.
There's some really weird ones. The worst placement I ever made was, there are some horrible stories. I mean, I hired a pharmacist they loved one time that they didn't actually see in person. And it was a hospital pharmacy that was very narrow and she didn't fit down the hallway. That was horrible. That is my worst ever experience in recruiting.
Well, you wouldn't have known. I mean,
horrible.
That's not something you would.
I mean, I didn't ask how wide is because the hospital pharmacy, they just walk down the aisle and grab the meds and then put them back on the cart. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so that was the worst. And then the second, because I had to have that conversation, like she called me crying and then they called me like, I don't even know what to do. And I'm like,
widen the door.
Yeah, it hasn't happened to me, right? And then the other absolute worst was a recovering addict who was a personal trainer who, within the 60-day, is when I was agency, within the 60-day guarantee, like just showed up, like couldn't even stand, to a hospital, not personal trainer, physical therapy job, So those are not funny at all. Do you know what I'm saying? And then you've got
life.
Funny, the kind of ironic one. I had a trainer one time when I was new in an agency who this lady called me and I was new and she was a doctor. No, she was a CRNA, a nurse anesthetist. And she told me she couldn't go to an interview because her husband died.
Oh.
And I was like, there's nothing in the objection manual for that one, right? I had the Ben Franklin clothes. I had all these clothes memorized, right? I had the fish, the frog in boiling water clothes. I had them all. And I didn't have one for that. So I just said, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So then
where do I send the flowers?
Yeah. They had one of this top producer who was training me, who wanted to show me how to hold a candidate accountable. And he called her and called her bluff.
Oh.
And the dude had actually died.
Oh,
The guy, and I couldn't stand this guy. He had been the bane of my existence for like 2 months, right? He was so much smarter than me. So this ego like recruiter calls her bluff and just says, if you don't want to interview, just tell us. And the woman like breaks down, like, of course, calls the owner of the search firm. And it was a large search firm. So that wasn't like calling the guy with 3 employees, right? But yeah, it was an absolute, that was a nightmare. That one was funny because he was such a horrible
and
person.
karma has a long arm and a long memory.
So I laughed at that one a little bit because it put him in a situation, but those are all 3 just horrible, right? Those are the things you deal with, know.
Okay, so Jaron, we've kind of covered the interesting and awkward HR thing, so we don't have to close with that. So you said something early on in the show, and you've alluded to it a couple of times, and I think it's very important. So I want to give you one more opportunity to pile on, and that is, you talked about your daughter getting engaged, and we all struggle with that. Listen, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I wrestle with lots of things that I know intellectually I should be doing or I shouldn't be doing, and yet I continue to do them. So it's all about action, right? It's not show fun, it's show business. So whatever you're doing, you need to, and one of the things I've discovered is just doing these little, there's all this research and studies around the dopamine release when you cross something off your to-do list. Like if I want to be a marathon runner, if on the first day I just put my shoes at the door, that's a win. So what if you could, we're going to close here. So what's your one piece of advice for someone that's looking for a job, that to leave them with, and hopefully something really, really meaty and juicy, not just encouragement, but an action item? What's something everyone that's listening that is struggling with, you're advocating?
Don't be too picky. And what I mean by that is, when I was looking for a job recently, my dream job it's actually what I ended up with, right? I wanted to stay in tech doing exactly what I had been doing, right? My secondary was to go back and be a TA practitioner again, because I knew I could feed my family with that. The third was to be a consultant, which I know I would be really good at, but there's less guarantee in that, right? So I had like 4 paths that would have been okay, and I worked every one of them. I can't tell you what a downer it is when people know, when you're in recruiting, people always call you for conversations like this. And then you talk to someone. I talked to a person I knew from my kids' athletics. It was one of the dads. The wife was like, told my wife, my husband's been unemployed for 8 months. Do you think Jeremy would meet with him? And so I met with him. The guy was so picky. And it's like your family is like cutting back on activities. Like your wife's working 2 jobs. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is, you know what I'm saying? Like life sucks, right?
Volunteer, go do something.
Right. Like do something. Like, I don't know. So don't, you have to open up your options very broadly in this environment. I would, not a time to be picky.
Perfect.
So, all right.
There. Okay. So
thank you guys.
Jeremy, how do people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
You can connect with me on the, let's see, Twitter. I am Jeremy R. So I'm Jeremy R on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, you can connect with me there. But, I'm pretty social. So you can find me.
Thank you, Jeremy. I really
appreciate you guys.
We're going to have to do this again.
Talk to you soon. Thanks a lot,
people. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.